Welcome everyone to Sunday Service. Welcome to my very, very, very hungry tiger. A lot to unpack there. We welcome the tigers. And we welcome all of you as well. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Compassion Consortium. I'm Reverend Sarah Bowen. I'm joined today by co-founders Victoria Moran, Reverend William Melton, and Adriana DeFazio. As always, Phil is navigating us right through the Zoomosphere, and later we'll be adding our service replays to YouTube. Elaine's here too to lead our Compassion in Action segment. And we have a treat today. We'll be watching a film for Compassion in Action, a short film called Anima, Animals, Faith, and Compassion, and have a talk with Dr. Lo Sprague. So that's pretty exciting. We also have Terry Cornwell with us, one of our chaplains in training, who will be engaging us in a gorgeous blessing for hidden creatures at the end of the service today. To ensure that we don't have unwanted, disruptive guests or extra tigers, we have turned off the Zoom sharing functions. We meet for Sunday service monthly, usually on the fourth Sunday of the month. If you're new to us, welcome. We are an interfaith, interspiritual, and interspecies community. Interfaith means we welcome people of any path or spiritual tradition, any religion, any system of meaning making, and we feature a diverse range of those within our programming. So today we'll be exploring Buddhism with Dharmacharya Seven. Interspiritual means that we believe underneath all of those paths of meaning making, there lies a commitment to three common values: peace, compassionate service, and love for the entire Earth community. Finally, we are interspecies, which means we consider the needs of the other than humans who we share this planet with. And now I am absolutely delighted to hand the floor over, or I suppose the Zoom box over, to Adriana DeFazio, who is our field education placement. She is working on her MDiv at Union Theological, and today she will frame our opening thoughts. Over to you, Adriana.
Thank you, Rev Sarah. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. These are the four great bodhisattva vows of Zen Buddhism. A bodhisattva is a being that has purposely chosen to postpone enlightenment, to be reborn in the cycle of life and death in order to help others on the path of awakening. When hearing these vows, you may experience feelings of open-heartedness, helplessness, despair, or some combination of all three. I vow to free all numberless beings. I vow to transform all delusions. I vow to perceive the boundlessness of reality. David Loy, Zen teacher and scholar, says that the vow cannot be fulfilled is not the problem, but the very point. Since it can't be achieved, what the vow really calls for is reorienting one's life from our usual self-preoccupation to primary concern for the well-being of everyone. I offer these vows to honor their aspiration, but also to acknowledge where many of us may begin or start in our unique activist vantage points. Those of us that care deeply about the more than human world, the plight of countless other species or ecosystems, and those most vulnerable and marginalized, may find that we draw our inspiration and energy from a sense of anger or despair at the injustices of our world. For me, anger is often a false source of energy and inspiration, as I can experience it through reactive or compulsive behavior. I can feel like an old car that's running on fuel that I keep trying to refill, but the danger of driving in that car only increases. Buddhist teacher Lama Rod Owens says that anger can often distract us from our purpose. He says, we in the world struggle because we have misused our anger by reacting to it, instead of partnering with the energy of anger to address the roots of why we hurt. For many of us, what's really under our anger is our woundedness, our heartbrokenness, a pain and grief that's born out of a deep love for our world. However, and this is the tricky part, to be connected to the wisdom of our anger and despair relies on our foundation of practice, of being embodied. Otherwise, we risk recreating violence. How do we cultivate our capacity to rest and act from the wisdom of our body? How do we ensure we discern the insight and searing clarity that our anger often points us to? In Tibetan Buddhism, the tradition in which I practice in, there's the teaching of the four dignities, four mythical creatures that represent certain awakened qualities of a one's innate nature. The first of the four dignities is that of the tiger. The tiger represents confidence, contentment, dignity, and mindfulness. The tiger enjoys these qualities due to her cultivation of discernment, the virtue of touching one's feet to the earth in every moment. Like the tiger, we can slow down, consider the seeds and fruits of our thoughts, words, and actions, and carefully observe our physical environment and the environment we create within our heart and mind. Drawing from the wisdom of the tiger, we strengthen our ability to discern what to accept and what to reject. We're able to hold a cradle of loving kindness for our anger, confusion, guilt, and despair, and not let it override us. With a tiger's discernment, we begin to feel thoroughly engaged in all aspects of our life. The four dignities is an example of how the Tibetan Buddhist tradition draws on the awakened nature of non-human animals to help humans reconnect to their own, often obscured, awakened character. But more so, is an example of the ways that humans often refer to the more than human world in order to reconnect back to who we truly are. That greed, aggression, and delusion are not our birthright, but rather painful conditioning that's obscured our capacity to see, feel, and act from our Buddha nature. Like how spending time in the natural world with other creatures or at home with our companion animals can often help us feel more at ease in our bodies. Cultivating our awareness and relationship with other species in our spiritual practices can remind us of our capacity to help heal, free, and transform the plight of so many beings. And so let's close as we began, offering our four great bodhisattva vows of Zen, an aspiration and dedication to honoring the anger and the embodied wisdom that arises from it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Over to you, William.
This is the time when we usually have our song of compassion. Instead, today, we are going to share with you a very special video during our Compassion in Action segment. And the music for this video is by Moby. So we will be sharing our song of compassion together with you during our Compassion in Action segment. However, there's something very serious and important I would like to share with you now. And that is, can you all see my shirt? Can everybody see my shirt? Yes, somebody can see my shirt? Okay, so you will see that I am wearing an official Compassion Consortium swag shirt. And you can find all the Compassion Consortium swag at the link that Sarah has posted into the chat. So I have a personal vision that at some future service, I will see all of our compassionates proudly wearing their Compassion Consortium swag, and only you can make this happen. So please visit our CC shop page, and you have my permission to purchase as much CC swag as you desire. So, one sad thing, the clerical collar must be purchased separately. All right, so now on to our Tenets of Agreement, which we always read at the beginning of our service. Today, our tenets will be read by Alice C. Gilbert. So she is a recently retired college mathematics instructor. She is a Main Street Vegan Academy graduate, certified vegan lifestyle coach and educator living in the Denver area. She will read the tenets.
We acknowledge a divine force at the heart of the universe and in all living beings. We may refer to this force as God, but it is known by many names and appears in different forms or as formless. We recognize the common moral principles inherent within all wisdom traditions. We affirm that compassion, reverence for life, and nonviolence are fundamental to religious faith and moral philosophy, and are to be extended to all sentient beings. We stand by the principles of inclusion, diversity, and equality, and hold these as essential in our human relations. We hold that non-human animals are imbued with the same essence of life and love as our human animals, and that there is moral parity between us. We avow that humans do not own the earth, its resources, or its inhabitants, but instead must be involved in their protection and care. We endeavor to eat and live in a kind and sustainable manner, moving away from animal foods and animal-derived clothing, as well as any activities that cause harm to our fellow beings, human or otherwise. We aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought to those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle. We offer guidance and peer support for all those seeking a more compassionate and spiritual life. And we commit to sharing these principles freely, with humility and respect, in support of non-human animals and the earth.
For our interspecies practice today, I'll offer a guided walking meditation practice, drawing from the wisdom of the tiger. In the space you're in, I invite you to stand and to place your hands at the base of your belly. If walking is not available to you right now, that's also okay. And you can work with the sensation of your body breathing as your object of concentration, bringing the qualities of the tiger to your sense of mindfulness and discernment. For both postures, you don't need to see me, but only hear my instructions. If you're standing, I invite you to now begin walking. Placing one foot in front of the other as if you're kissing the earth with your feet. You may walk in the shape of a circle, whatever is available to you in your space. Invoking the qualities of the tiger, walking slowly through the rainforest. The tiger looks before they leap. They are completely engaged. The tiger's contentment, ability to stay grounded to the earth, is derived from knowing that everything it needs is contained in the present moment. Synchronizing your body and mind, feel the sensation of your feet walking, one in front of the other. Feel the sensation of your legs shifting weight, the sensation of the earth beneath you, holding, supporting you. And if you're seated, bring that same quality of mindfulness and discernment to the sensation of your body breathing. Air flowing in and out. Continuing to breathe and walk, just like the tiger. Allowing your body to sense, feel the quality as the tiger, the holding of the earth, and most importantly, the wisdom of your body. Practicing like so for a few more moments. Just like the tiger in the rainforest. There's a sense of purpose, intention of every breath and every step. And in your own time now, if you're walking, I invite you back to your seat. If you've been seated, opening your eyes and bringing your awareness back into your space. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for everything that has happened up until now. And we are entering into our interfaith segment, in which I'm going to be having a lovely chat for the next 22 minutes with Dharmacharya Seven. So if we could have him highlighted, thank you so much, Phil. So Seven is coming to us today from Los Angeles. He is a teacher in the Buddhist tradition, and he has studied himself just about everywhere, Berkeley and UCLA, Yale, Oxford, and also studying spirituality in Southeast Asia and in India. Welcome, Seven.
Thank you. Welcome.
It's so wonderful to have you. We had a little chat yesterday. It's always fun whenever I get to do a free chat and feel like before I introduce these people to you, I already know how cool they are. So that makes me lucky. So just give us a little bit of your fascinating background, Seven, that you're a Native American person raised by Buddhists. Tell us about your formative years.
Well, if only I had been fortunate enough to be raised by Buddhists. Actually, I was born into a Native American family with roots in this area in Los Angeles. And raised in sort of a Christian environment.
Sorry, I misheard you yesterday.
With very liberal mother and a very good example of a father who made it easy for me to think, this is not the tradition that I'm finding answers. And in so doing, I was able to explore. And I think it first happened that in the Los Angeles area, it was easy to find yoga. And by finding yoga, to find the Eastern traditions and go to college and ask the questions of my political and religious studies professors. You know, there's a material world, but there's a spiritual world. And to find out that these questions had been asked for a long time, had been explored very deeply, and that there were many traditions. And I pointed it out to my mother. I said, did you realize there are other religions? And she's like, well, they just call Jesus by different names and different traditions. And I corrected her and I said, no, there are other spiritual beings. Have you ever heard of the Buddha? And she goes, that's just what the Chinese are calling Jesus. And I pointed out to her that she had a Guanyin statue. And she goes, oh, that's the Virgin Mary. And I said, well, mother, either you've known it all along or you've accepted it without even realizing it, that the commonalities were so great that it was possible to find it on your own, mother, and continue it and pass it on to me. Then studying in college, going to Berkeley, I had the opportunity to go to Oxford. Then at Oxford, people talked about India, and I thought, it seems not so far from here, you know, from Europe. It just seems so close by, and I thought I must get there. But I had to go to graduate school, and then I got the scholarship sort of angle. And I can honestly say to the world that if you had the opportunity to practice on the one hand, or on the other hand, study, you should practice, pursue the practice, far more important. But I had a mind that needed to know, that needed answers, that wasn't going to accept anything on blind faith. And, you know, very famously in Buddhism, there's the Kalama Sutra. The Kalama Sutra asks for a spirit of inquiry, free inquiry, that any question, no question is off limits. If you ask, what is the origin of God? You know, that question is verboten. And we're told, let's not ask that. Let's not offend the Lord. But in Buddhism, you could ask this question and you could get answers, and answers that made sense. So for me, going to then graduate school at UCLA, I was able to pursue the scholarship with actual scholars and see it from both ends, not just as a reader, but the producer of sort of the knowledge base that we have. So
I love that. And I relate also to India is not so far. I was going to China some years ago and looked at a map, and it's like, well, there's Tibet and there's Nepal and there's India. That's nothing, when indeed that's more or less everything. So I just want to let everybody know that Seven is wearing a mask because to get good Wi-Fi reception, he had to go to a place where the mask is required. So what led you then to vegetarianism and veganism?
It's interesting because as a young boy, I was in a band, and one of the members said, I'm going to become a vegetarian. I said, that's ridiculous. But I said, since you're doing it, I'll do it too, just to prove how ridiculous it is. And a week later, he gave up, and I never gave up. So I was, all of my adult life have been a vegetarian. And it wasn't enough, I quickly discovered, to be a vegetarian. So taking out more things from my diet, then I became a vegan, and I thought, wow, sort of like a shark needs to keep moving to swim and to thrive. And I found the more things I left out, the more labels I read, the more ingredients that I realized were animal products, I became healthier. And I was always very connected, as is native tradition, with nature. So in nature, you see there all the plants that can heal us, all the forest that sustains us. And by doing so, by carrying on in the tradition, the native tradition, because people ask me oftentimes, doesn't native spirituality, it's really just Catholicism. And I said, that's the imposed religion. Spanish is the imposed language. The native tongues, which were illegal to speak in this country till about 1972. So people always say, why don't you just revive the traditions? It's not so easy. It's not a matter of people didn't want to hold on to this knowledge. And the same with Buddhism. There's a divide between the Sanskrit world and the Pali world. But it's almost a silly distinction because Pali is to Sanskrit what Spanish is to Latin. They're rooted in the same Indo-European sort of family of languages. And Pali was the language spoken by the people. So if the Buddha had wanted to be a scholar and only speak to Brahmins, then that's what he would have done. But he was not born into a Brahmin caste where it would have been readily available. The Buddha had an excellent education, what we could think of as a college education, tutored at home in the British manner, because he was being groomed to be the ruler of the area where he lived, which was actually in Central Asia, near India. He moved to India, as I think all young men at some point get an urge in them. I want to head east to find wisdom. And as I myself wanted to leave the West to find the wisdom of the East, when you get there, you realize you could stand in the place where you are. It's possible anywhere to do this. But for some of us, we need the visceral experience. We need to enter the jungle. We need to practice in a monastic fashion. And I don't know what I had in me that led me so strongly, that pulled me in that direction. But by doing so, I had the firsthand experience that I could come back and say, oh, this is what is actually believed. This is, if you ask the actual practitioners, what they practice, not limited in to books. At UCLA, I had a professor, and he wrote a book about Zen. And he said, you know, Zen is thoroughly misunderstood in the West as if they're anti-scholarship and do nothing. When in fact, having done the scholarship, they leave that behind and then they enter practice. So it's no longer a discussion and a debate, but an actual practice. And his name was Professor Buswell. He then explained that he, in his own search, he started in Korea. He practiced in the Mahayana, the Zen tradition, and then went to a Theravada country and ordained and practiced in that tradition, then came back to the West, became a professor at UCLA. And I said, wait, you could do all those things and carry on a normal life? And, you know, it's the spirit of exploration that I think leads one to have to see firsthand, what will I do with my life? Where will I find meaning? And interestingly, the Buddha was more a shaman than a priest, right? About the direct personal experience of these things, of the truth. It's not that he read it somewhere. It's not that it's a continuation of Hinduism. It's not that he was immersed in the Vedas and simply repeating that Vedic knowledge. He went beyond that and he said, there's a direct knowledge, a direct way of seeing. And this was very much aligned with Native American tradition, that everybody is called to have an experience where they go out and see for themselves.
And that was one of the interesting things that you were talking about in our previous conversation, that the Native American tradition, as we all know, has a great connection to nature. But what a lot of people don't know is that there is a forest tradition within Buddhism, which happens to be your tradition.
Yes,
so fill us in on that.
Well, the forest tradition, generally credited to Thailand, where they thought, we've come a long way and we've come to where there are monks in monasteries, simply practicing or studying. But the Buddha talked about a monastic tradition based in the forest. He emerged from the forest. He himself lived in the forest his whole life. Later on, as monasteries were donated, they were not monasteries in the way we envisioned them, you know, in the Roman style, but rather there was one place called Bamboo Grove in Rajgir, India. And the Bamboo Grove was a place where people would go see the Buddha. And they asked him, you know, you could live in a palace. And he goes, I've left that all behind. So Buddhism is about avoiding extremes. So the extreme of hedonistic indulgence, living as a prince, the extreme of asceticism as if doing penance were going to solve all our problems. So the Thai forest tradition established, we need to get back to basics. And the basics of this tradition are not, let us simply meditate for the sake of samadhi, for the sake of calm, but mindfulness and insight. And the insight practice is really what made, or what caught on and made this Thai forest tradition, not only in Thailand, but then spreading to Sri Lanka, to Burma, to go back, you could say back to nature. It's no accident that the Buddha became enlightened under a tree. The reason he did that is he was born under a tree. He chose consciously to pass away under two trees, two sal trees. And every Buddha previously, he told us, had their own kind of enlightenment tree, different species of tree. It wasn't always the Bo tree or Ficus religiosa, but it was a tree specifically chosen as if the earth is giving us her energy, as if the trees are in partnership with us. I always want to mention, because this is an extraordinary thing that I found, the worst thing about Asia, the worst thing about living in the forest, in the jungle, to me, are the mosquitoes. But as somebody discovered, the mosquitoes seem to have a consciousness or an alignment with the trees and with the forest. So when they sense your peace and your purpose of being there, they don't bother you. When they sense a bad purpose, they don't leave you alone. So when I would travel in Asia, I would think, oh, this would be perfect if there just weren't these mosquitoes. When I calm down, they calm down. When I approached the forest in a certain way, the forest approached me in a certain way. And I thought, this is the essence of native knowledge, the native wisdom, that you could almost think of it in a pantheistic way, that the mountains are alive, the trees are alive, the rivers are alive. All these things are sensed. And the deeper you meditate, the more you become in tune with it. You sense that energy, and you sense the assistance of a tree. You know, when we sit in meditation, at least formal sitting meditation, we hold up our back, and sort of there's an upsurge of yogic pranic energy that holds us up. It seems to come from the roots of the tree to help us. And people said, well, you don't really believe that the tree is aware of you. Well, there was an Indian scientist whose last name is Bose, B-O-S-E, who proved that plants are aware, that plants have some semblance, something called, that we could call consciousness. They may not be thinking in abstract ways, and they might. I'm not saying they're not. The sensitivity that the Native American tradition promotes is exactly, in this sense, the Buddhist tradition. And it's very interesting that when the Dalai Lama first came to this country, he came to the Southwest and he met with the Native Americans there, and they immediately recognized one another by the turquoise jewelry, by the styles. When I went to Ladakh, India, I saw Native American photographs, and I thought, what are these doing here? And they're like, these aren't Native American photographs. These are Tibetan people, but they had the same braided hair, the same woven styles. And I said, no, somebody's playing a joke. And then you look more closely and you could see tiny differences. But they had bison there in Tibet, just as we had here in the Plains states. Mm-hmm. And the extraordinary similarities, it turned out, were no accident, because Edward P. Vining wrote about it in 1885. And Rick Fields wrote about it in our lifetime in a book called How the Swans Came to the Lake. It's a narrative history of Buddhism in the United States or in the Americas, that those people visited here. So the book Vining wrote was called An Inglorious Columbus. It wasn't Columbus who discovered it. It wasn't Christianity. It wasn't Catholicism that first came to this country. Buddhism was here beforehand. So it's not just that there are extraordinary similarities because all religions are the same. No, they were actually here. It's documented in Chinese written accounts, and we have a lot of archaeological evidence for it. Vining goes, it's a more than a 500-page book, so that these things are talked about. For me, being from here, feeling connected to the land here in the Los Angeles area, particularly the Pasadena area, I thought it's all always made sense. we've confounded the picture. We've believed the story of a sort of imperial rule. Oh, this is a new land, no one was here, and we're going to start fresh. And it was never that way. And if we seek our own spiritual evolution, we think, oh, I'm going to start fresh. No one's ever done this before, but we find, oh, it has been done before. There is a path. It's established, and Buddha's really, their purpose is to point the way. There's a famous saying, we ourselves, by ourselves is evil done, by ourselves is evil left undone. We ourselves make this choice. No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. Buddhas merely point the way. It tells us that the responsibility is ours, and we have a lot of help from nature in doing it.
Beautiful. So you follow the Theravada path, and we've had Buddhists speak with us before, and one of the things that was explained is that very often in the Theravada path, even though we think of Buddhism as being vegetarian and full of ahimsa, that a lot of Theravada Buddhists say, oh no, it's okay to eat meat because the Buddha said so. And you have somewhat of a different take on that. So
Right.
Please explain.
The Buddha didn't really say so. What he said was that for monastics, there is the responsibility for getting food is from the donors. So what the donors offer, you may eat. And there's no, I think we would all agree that if you were starving, if you didn't have any means of gaining your own food, then you might accept the food you were given and you might eat and appreciate that food. You certainly don't have to eat it, but that if you did, any harm in the making of that food, that is of the person who made it and gave it to you. So the Buddha had and followed this tradition of dana, which says these people are dedicated to their spiritual pursuits. They're not making their own food, so let us support them. And throughout the history of India, people understood that these sorts of people are vegetarian. It's not likely that anybody was giving them meat, but if they went to a new area and meat eating was practiced there, they might offer that. And if they offered that, the monastics were told, it's okay that you partake of what you're given. The Buddha said in a very interesting proviso, he said, imagine that there were a mother and father with a child, and they were crossing a long wilderness, a long desert. Midway through, they might run out of food, and they might have to resort to eating their own child. Now, if they did such a thing, would they do this with great relish or with great reluctance? Would they eat their own child to fatten their bodies, to smarten their bodies, to make themselves beautiful, or simply to survive? And with this attitude, should people eat meat if it's an absolute necessity, if there's nothing else to eat, if that's all that's offered to preserve life in a place, and we could imagine far outside of India, though there was no India at the time actually, because these were separate states, separate kingdoms, and the Buddha was living in Magadha and Bihar. So the attitude was not, oh, it's fine, just do what you like, so long as you didn't kill it. No, if you even suspected that it was killed for you, it's a violation of the rules to eat it. So it's not okay, but people have made of the rule saying, so long as you don't know and you didn't kill it. So if I go to the grocery store and I'm buying what's already slaughtered, I'm not engaged in killing. But I've often argued, that's like saying to the Godfather, did you kill this man? Oh, no, it was my assistant Guido. Oh, okay, well, then you're off the hook. Oh, well, Guido, why did you kill this man? Oh, the boss told me I had to do it, right? So we have the idea that if you go to the butcher and you say, you didn't kill this meat for me, right? Oh, no, I killed it for everybody. I actually killed it for anybody who buys it. So as soon as you purchase it, it was killed for you. So this would be in violation of the rule within Theravada. But of course, nobody thinks like this. People having the desire to eat meat find excuses and find ways around. The Buddha, we don't have any time where it's pointed out that the Buddha was eating meat, because it would be preposterous to offer a holy man that kind of meal. But people do point to one time where the Buddha ate a meal called pig's delight. It was his final meal. And pig's delight is actually mushrooms, truffles, what pigs delight in eating. He was given these truffles, and he said to the Chunda, the blacksmith, offer them only to me and then bury the rest of it. There is no other digestive system that could handle it. Apparently, the Buddha's digestive system couldn't handle it either. So he consciously ate these mushrooms, but people point to it and say, oh, look at there. The Buddha's having pork chops and applesauce. And it's not true, but with this sort of rationalization, people have made it okay. And the Buddha said something perhaps more important. It's not really about our diet that makes us spiritual or not spiritual. And people frequently ask me, is there any tradition of Native Americans who were vegan, who were even vegetarian? And I say, of course there were vegetarian Native Americans, and there were even vegan Native American vegetarians. For instance, all the shamans, all the medicine women and medicine men would have practiced this. Are you going to tell me that in a large population of people, no one has that natural ahimsa, that natural affinity for compassion, who sees an animal slaughtered and thinks, I want no part of that? Of course that would have happened. And because it's not formally spelled out in written records, people say, oh, no, they were hunters and they were doing this and that. And these images we have, that's what people know, and that's what people believe. And because there aren't written records to go and say, here it happened, here it didn't happen. It's this way, it's that way. There was no word vegan, I imagine. And this is our own definition of what counts as vegan. Will honey count as vegan? Will it not? We dispute it amongst ourselves. But clearly there have always been people with a compassionate ideal, with the compassion, for instance, today.
I'm so sorry, Seven. You are certainly one of those. We need to stop. I'm sorry. We've gone a bit over our time. I hope that you can stay with us today. At the end, we do go into breakout groups, and some lucky people will be in a group with you, and hopefully you can continue sharing some of this beautiful wisdom. Thank you so much.
In Los Angeles, we're celebrating our vegan street fair today, which is a national thing, so it'll come to your area. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And passing it along for Compassion in Action.
Thank you, Victoria. Today in Compassion in Action, we'll be watching a beautiful short film called Anima. This film was produced by the Giebord Center, which is a spiritually centric interfaith organization that opens hearts and minds by challenging assumptions, by experiencing the sacred, and by embracing spirituality, all with the aim of transforming the world. But before watching the film, we're going to chat briefly with Dr. Lo Sprague, president of the Giebord Center. And Dr. Lo has recently returned from South Africa, where she was doing rescue work with the Animal Defenders International. Welcome, Dr. Lo.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And I want to thank everybody on this Zoom today for the work that all of you are doing to show compassion to animals. It takes all of us, and it does make a difference. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you. And
Go ahead.
Please.
Sorry.
I'm excited to share this film with you. I will tell you a little bit about how it came to be. In about 2016, I became aware of the work of Animal Defenders International. And at the time, they were rescuing lions from the circuses in Peru. And the thing that struck me about their work was not only were they rescuing this group of lions and getting them out of the circus, they literally went in and had the strategic awareness and asked the question about how do we shut down the industry of using wild animals in circuses. So they went in, they went undercover, they filmed the circuses for around a year. They then went to legislators and said, we think this practice should be stopped. They had hearings. The circuses said, oh no, we love animals. We're so good to our animals. At which point they showed the films, and the legislators voted to ban all circus animals in Peru. So they were rescuing not only those lions, they were rescuing all the future lions. And I love their work because they have that kind of strategy when they take on an action. And so I, at the time, was the vice president of the Gibord Center, which is, as you said, a spiritually centric interfaith organization. And the thing that struck me as I learned more and more about the work of animal defenders was there was no voice of faith. There were no people of faith that were speaking up. And so I spoke with Gwen Gibord, who was our leader, and said, can I take this to our advisory council? And she said, sure. So we had about 35 different leaders all across the faith spectrum in Los Angeles. And I said to them, this is the situation. I think we should participate. I think we should speak up. What do you think? And unanimously, I mean, it was instant and it was unanimous. We're in. So I said, will you join me in making this film and will you speak out? And they said, yes. So with great naivete, no budget, we set out to make this little 12-minute film. And a number of our advisors participated in that. I want to say that at the time, we had enough money to film for 12 days. So we filmed as much as we could. You're going to see a 12-minute film, but there's actually hours of B-roll. And this film is just an introduction. It's just raising the topic. It's just saying faith communities have a lot to say about animals, and compassion begins with animals. So we finished the film in 2018. I went into Guatemala in 2019, at the beginning of 2019, to participate in a rescue of 17 lions and tigers. And I have to say, Adriana, I loved your meditation. I was just with tigers over my shoulder for the last couple of weeks, and it's an amazing experience to get the privilege of doing that. But we got on a plane and came back late February in 2019, and COVID struck. And so everything shut down. But while we were in Guatemala, what I did is I reached out to the Bishop of Guatemala, the Episcopal bishop, and asked him if he would do a blessing for these animals before we took them around the world. And he was thrilled. And for those of us who want to get folks involved, he was absolutely thrilled to do that. And came, and we were filming, and I suddenly realized he's standing there in front of these temporary cages, and he's apologizing on behalf of humanity to these animals for what we've done.
That's so
was
beautiful.
The most stunning experience. And
That's so beautiful.
it was amazing. And then we were also able to reach out to the woman who was the woman in charge of the Mayan sacred book. And we asked her if she would come as an indigenous person and give a blessing for the animals. As you know, in many countries, the indigenous are not particularly respected or included. She was thrilled to come. She did an extraordinary blessing. We had to cut it short because it would have taken 3 days and we were trying to get out of the country, but we also filmed that. So we're just now getting the film back. So what you're going to see with Anima is really an introduction. It's a way for us to begin to have conversations about what does kindest animals really look like? Why is it important not to eat animals? Why is it important to consider them? And I have to say, I urge all of you to go to Animal Defenders International's Facebook page and follow them. The sanctuary that they're doing in South Africa, I've been following it very closely, but being there, it was stunning to experience how thoroughly at every moment they considered every aspect of what they were doing and what its implications would be. They were in the process of planting 250 indigenous trees to rewild the land again. They were, with every animal, considering whatever they could do to support its life at a time when they can never be released in the wild again. Circus animals have had their claws and their teeth broken, and you can't turn them loose. So how can we give them a life that allows them to not be seen unless they choose to be seen? How can you let the grass grow tall enough so they can hide? How can you give them the choice to be outside in a huge rainstorm and yet have some shelter? How do you take care of their medical needs and give them a kind of freedom in the course of that? And it was a thoughtfulness. I mean, if we talk about Buddhism and a mindfulness, there is a kind of thoughtfulness that goes all the way to a local dog that had been abused, who was brought into the sanctuary. It was wild tortoises. They're constantly being offered animals that come out of the illicit trade. And someone had 2 tortoises that had been saved. Well, they have 500 wild tortoises on the property. So yes, they found just the right place to release these to give them time to adjust.
Dr. Lowe, I'm so sorry.
stunning.
I have to interrupt again because we have a schedule.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
But I do want to thank you so much for the background on this film
Yes.
and how wonderfully worthwhile the Animal Defenders International is, and for that recommendation to follow them. So many of us have been looking forward to seeing this film.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much.
Animals are sacred.
Islam says.
Christianity says.
Zoroastrians believe.
The native way says that
animals are sacred.
In Sikhism,
Hinduism,
Jainism,
Judaism says.
All beings are sacred.
All of God's creations
are sacred.
Animals are God's creation.
Animals are living, breathing beings.
Animals have feelings.
Just like you and I.
Animals should be treated with respect.
With kindness.
With dignity.
With compassion.
I have a responsibility
to protect animals.
I have a responsibility.
I have a responsibility.
We all have a responsibility to protect animals.
We all have a responsibility
to stand up for all animals.
I stand for animals.
I stand for animals.
I stand for animals.
People of faith stand for animals.
We will put a link to that in the chat at the end of the service today for folks who want to see that trailer again, get information on the center and all of that. Thank you both so much for this offering. And next, Phil, could you bring up Terry Cornwell with me for blessings and prayers? Terry has more than there's Terry. Hi, Terry. Terry has more than 40 years teaching experience in public and private schools and universities. She has a doctorate in public communication, has served as a legislative director for the Congressional Arts Caucus in Washington, D.C., and recently completed her divinity degree from a Presbyterian USA seminary. She and her husband have 2 adult children and share their home in Virginia with their cat and dog companions. And Terry is joining us today because she is one of our animal chaplains in training and has written the most beautiful blessing for hidden creatures. We have talked today about some majestic animals. We have talked about tigers. We have talked about lions, exploited animals, and Terry is going to add one more layer today here for hidden creatures.
Holy mystery, creator of all things, from whom all life flows, we humbly come to you as the divine we seek behind our everyday reality, to ask your blessings, as one in our chaplaincy gathering has said, on our furried, finned, and feathered friends. But we know that the life force that flows through furried, finned, and feathered creatures also flows through the tiniest of insects, without which our Earth's ecosystem would collapse. So we ask your blessing on every creature we know to be imbued with the mystery we call life. We are grateful that more and more of our spiritual communities are making space for blessing God's creatures. But what these communities often miss are the hidden creatures, those who move quietly into life and make their exit with little notice. May we be mindful of these creatures as we come upon them in our daily lives. Bless Shakespeare, the tiny kitten brought to a shelter in Lynchburg, Virginia, with his litter mates who did not survive long enough to move into foster care, and bless others like him in shelters across the country. Bless Tawny, an old dog who died while his girl companion was away at college and was buried behind the garage without a memorial. May all of our animal companions have peaceful passings and tender memorials as they move from life into the infinite mystery of what lies beyond. Bless the animal companions euthanized several years ago in Memorial Hospital in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, when lack of food, excessive heat, and rising water made rescue seem impossible. Bless all the animals lost to natural disasters. Bless the hundreds of beagles who lost their lives at Envigo in Virginia before their 4,000 brothers and sisters were rescued. May science work toward research that does not involve live animals. Bless the creatures who find themselves on our roads and highways and whose lives end in violent deaths. May more ways be found to direct wild animals away from human activity, and may human activity always be cognizant of the delicate natural habitats. May more and more people become advocates for all living creatures and for the marvelous natural creation that covers our blue marble of earth in the mysterious universe. May our care of creation be worthy to the love that you have shown in giving us life. May our relationships with all creatures mirror that love. And finally, give us strength and understanding to care with compassion for all living creatures.
Amen, Terry. If we left anyone out, please put in the chat anyone you would like blessings and prayers for today, folks. Terry, blessings for you for bringing us this beautiful offering and raising up all these amazing, amazing creatures. And I could invite everyone else here to join us in offering a final blessing with us, the same one we do every month. Taking a deep breath, saying the words that we know so well, as if we are saying them for the first time. May all creatures everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our life contribute to this happiness and this freedom for all. May it be so. Amen. So mote it be. Any final closing word that I happen to miss? Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everyone else who was involved in this service today. I'm going to put an extra link there in the chat today for tigers. And I'm going to hand the floor over to Reverend William for some announcements before we head to fellowship.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for being with us today. I'm still trying to recover from that video. I just thought it was so meaningful. So anyway, thank you for joining us. And so here's a few announcements about what's coming up. If you will be in New Orleans for the Humane Society's Animal Care Expo, you can come by and chat with Reverend Sarah, Jill, and Patrick at the Compassion Consortium booth. And Reverend Sarah will also be leading a roundtable lunch on tips for encouraging well-being for animal care professionals, advocates, and rescue workers. So on to the next slide. So our next engaged member practice will be at 8 p.m. on April 17th. And Victoria will lead us in part 3 of her Ayurveda series. So on Sunday, April 23, which is our next spiritual service, our special guest will be Swami Chidananda. Swami Chidananda is a monk, the Bhakti Marga order, representing the branch of Hinduism based on love and devotion. He is an American of Indian descent. He was living a fully secular life until a spiritual experience changed everything. He spent 5 years in the tutelage of his guru. In late 2022, founded the all-vegan Bhakti Marga Ashram in Elmira, New York, which is the site of the upcoming Soul of Ahimsa retreat, co-sponsored by the Compassion Consortium at the ashram in early June. Which leads me directly into the next slide, which is the Compassion Consortium is a co-sponsor of this experiential in-person spiritual retreat coming to upstate New York, June 2, 3, and 4 in the Ithaca area. It's called the Soul of Ahimsa, a vegan spirituality retreat. And the featured presenters are the legendary nutritional biochemist T. Colin Campbell, PhD, author of the China Study, our own Victoria Moran, and Swami Chidananda. Those are the, okay, so if you enjoyed this service and you want to support our future Compassion Consortium programming, we encourage you to donate on our website at the link posted in the chat box. We are always willing to accept donations. Not required, but they are always welcomed. And so lastly, don't forget to check out our membership program, and all the details are on our website at compassionconsortium.org/membership, which I think is also in the chat. So that is all I have to say.